We are back, and Gloria Allred, who represents two of the women who are victims, she would say, of Harvey Weinstein, who testified. She is giving a press conference in front of the courthouse. Let's listen.
Assaulted or raped by an acquaintance as opposed to a stranger in a dark alley. There is continued communication of some kind. She didn't testify to this, but I'll just add, when I was at the People versus Bill Cosby trial, the defense tried to suggest that because, and did suggest, that because there was continued communication by Andrea Constant, the victim in that case, with Mr. Cosby, that must mean that to sexual activity with Mr. Cosby. The jury didn't buy it. The victim was able to explain the continued communication. That was part of her employment responsibility, and she took it seriously, and she did it. It didn't mean that what she alleged happened to her never happened. So I hope that this jury also understands that even though there was continued communication by my client, Mimi Haley, and I might add, it was relatively minimal. It doesn't mean that what she alleged didn't happen. The criminal sexual activity, which is the charge, in reference to forced oral sexual activity, it doesn't mean it didn't happen because there was some continued communication. And for those of you who also have been saying that, you know, the second incident with Ms. Haley was consensual, that's not the case. The fact that she didn't resist doesn't mean that it was consensual. There is a distinction. Consent needs to be given in advance, as Dr. Ziv has testified. And Mimi's position is no consent was given in advance. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I do not wish to paraphrase the court. In reference to the jury instructions it has given, I don't think that would be respectful of the court.
Gloria, have you read Donna's
Pardon me?
So hard to hear.
I'm sorry.
Are you satisfied, or how do you feel about the way that the charges were explained to the jury with the sexual predatory sexual charge and the other charges? Can you help us understand that? And do you feel that that was helpful to the jury the way that was explained?
You know, all I'll say is jury instructions are routinely discussed and argued about with the judge, with the court. And then the court rules about the content and the, you know, in what order instructions are given. So that's not unusual.
This is what you do not do in the street.
And
this is what these people do.
And that's
This is what they try to do.
you know, the court has ruled, and that's it. Someone had a question over here.
Yeah, did you read Donna Rotuno's op-ed over the weekend in Newsweek?
I did.
Do you think it was appropriate?
I think given the court's prior order in reference to the defense speaking to the press, giving interviews to the press, that it was not appropriate. And I'm glad that the prosecution brought it to the court's attention. So even though the court did not in any way reprimand or discipline or sanction Ms. Rotuno for having written and had published her op-ed piece, the court did advise and order Ms. Rotuno and the defense not to provide further interviews to the press during this time. I think this court is very measured in its rulings. it doesn't, the court judge does not,
Gloria,
jump to extremes. I think the court is very thoughtful and measured, and once the court rules, that's it.
Do you think she was speaking directly to this jury, and have you ever seen something like that before? She
Well-
said members of this jury.
I think it was ill-advised. I see it as an act of desperation to try to appeal to the jury. I mean, I can only speculate as to why she did it. Some of the speculation might be that she didn't feel secure about the defense final argument, and so she felt that she needed to make one more pitch to the jury. But I could be wrong. I don't know why she did it. I mean, the jurors are only supposed to decide this case, we've said it many times, based on the evidence admitted in the courtroom, not based on anything in the court of public opinion or published by the media. But I guess she felt that she needed to do it. I think it denotes a concern that perhaps she feels that the court of public opinion is going to influence the jurors, which it should not. And they have been instructed previously not to decide this case based on anything in the press that they've read, heard, said. But maybe she doesn't feel that the jurors are going to follow the court's instructions. I think every presumption should be resolved in favor of respecting the jury and expecting them to follow the court's instructions rather than trying to do an end run around those instructions by somehow appealing to the jury in the court of public opinion. It's not appropriate. It's especially not appropriate at this stage where the jury has begun to deliberate. She did it. She took the risk. And it was brought to the court's attention. If they try to do it again during jury deliberation, I don't think that the court will take kindly to that. But I don't know. I mean, court is just trying to be very measured in its response, and I think, everyone always in a trial is always trying to protect the record, protect the jury process, because in the event there's a conviction, then, I think it's highly likely that Mr. Weinstein would be appealing. So everything the court rules could be an issue. May or may not be a successful issue, but it could be an issue or an argument on appeal. So, I don't know.
Ms. Allred, in terms of what this verdict, whenever the verdict comes down from the jury to be, what do you think it will have an impact on how people look at the Me Too movement?
Assuming there is a verdict, which we don't know. We don't know if they'll be able to reach a verdict. I mean, 3 possibilities: conviction, acquittal, mistrial. Not necessarily in that order, but, it's... I think of it as a case, and there are a lot of people looking at it as a case, and there's some people looking at it as an issue for the movement. I right now would like to look at it as a case, and that's the way the jurors are instructed to make their decision. So between now and whenever that decision comes, there may be questions for the court that the jury has, and I'll be interested in seeing what those questions are. Everybody tries to guess at what a verdict might be based on questions, which is not possible, but everybody has a right to guess. So I'll be interested in seeing what those questions are, if they have any.
We actually just have 5 questions.
Pardon me?
They have questions.
Just now?
They're asking for clarification on charges, including forcible compulsion. They want an explanation of the law pertaining to Annabella and the statute of limitations on certain legal acts. They want to know if they can find a guilty of counts 4 or 5 or both. They want to know about considering count 1
Okay. Well, we'll see. We'll see how we'll see how the court addresses those questions, and whether the court is able to respond in any way other than in repeating what has already been read to the jury as part of the jury instructions.
How concerned are you that there was, though, continued communication? How
Well, as I say, I just addressed that. I'm not. If they will review the testimony and give credence to the testimony of the prosecution expert, Dr. Ziv, then they will know that her expert opinion, and she is an expert, qualified as an expert in many, many trials, I think she said hundreds, that continued communication does not mean that a rape or a sexual assault did not take place. And so that's really important. It's a rape myth that if there's continued communication, there must not have been a criminal act. It doesn't mean there was, but it doesn't mean that there wasn't. So, all right, well, we'll see what happens, how the court addresses those questions.
Gloria, one last question. How are the women that you represent, how are they holding up waiting for this verdict?
I think I'd rather not comment on it, but thank you so much for asking. I appreciate it.
Well, that was Gloria Allred. As you know, she represents Mimi Haley and Annabelle Shora, who both testified in this trial. We are heard that the jury is already asking questions. We will get those questions to you as soon as we can. Something about a clarification. We did hear Gloria say something about a clarification of the forcible rape charge. So let me bring my guests back in. Joe Scott Morgan, juries ask questions. Now, you've testified in so many cases. The fact that a jury asks a question right off the bat, does that mean they're already confused, or what do you think? Let's read some tea leaves for our viewers.
I think that this case is so convoluted.
Yeah.
There's so many actors in this case. Their heads have got to be collectively spinning. I'm sure that they're sitting there in silence, having listened to everything, and they do need clarification. Listen. They're not doing this in a vacuum, Linda. They're fully aware that all eyes are upon them. Before they go back into that room, they want to know that every jot and tittle is covered prior to exiting. I think that that's what you're seeing right now.
A jot and tittle. Did you? Wait, Joseph. We'll have to explain that because I may be confused. Dr. Priya Pajri, let me just ask you this. And Joseph is laughing because he knows that not many things get me riled, right? You know. But,
yeah.
let me ask you this. You said it was before we left that you, as a woman, felt it difficult to ignore the Molyneux witnesses. Now, the judge, from my understanding from Jesse Weber, who's been in the courtroom this morning, who was sending us notes, charged the Molyneux first. He charged the greater rather than the lesser. Don't you see an issue with that, even sitting there as a layperson? Do you think he should have just charged on the two victims to see whether Harvey Weinstein was guilty on those? And if he's not, then go to the other witnesses? Didn't it color your judgment to hear the Molyneux first?
I mean, I think that's what they were going for. They're going for to establish a repeated pattern. We talked about the weakness in this case is the lack of the direct forensic evidence. And really, if I was a juror, even with my medical knowledge, I would want clarification, right? How much can I weigh on the Molyneux witness versus the true, people that have the charges against them, And some of it's so much, I don't want to say hearsay, but he said, she said, is that scientific? Can I really make such a distinct, impactful judgment on that kind of information? I think that's what they're asking clarification for. And that's what I think would be incredibly difficult to sort out.